Hey there. Welcome back to the Space for Magic podcast. And when I say welcome back, it's because I am back and I am so excited to be here. And this episode is for you if you have been feeling lost, maybe you've been feeling like you're not sure if you're fulfilling your purpose, what your purpose is, do you have a purpose? Or if you're feeling like God, source, divine, spirit has maybe abandoned you, or you just really feel disconnected from a spiritual anchor or a spiritual source. So if you're experiencing any of that, this episode I believe is going to help. And what you will end up with, I hope, if I do my job by the end of this podcast, is an understanding of what this time really is about, how to navigate that time, and hopefully a little inspiration along the way. So I refer to these periods as the desert, the metaphorical desert. Just like Jesus was in the desert for 40 days and other prophets have been put into a period of suspension and challenge and difficulty, many of us are experiencing our own deserts. And I certainly was there a couple of months ago. And I had talked to my community about it and I got a big response. So I think if you're feeling it, just know you're not alone. And part of it is a nature of our post-pandemic world where we just collectively have not done enough to process the grief and the trauma that came from the pandemic. The reality is all of us lost something, whether we realize it or not, and lost a lot of things, right? And this time, if you are feeling that lost feeling, I will tell you in part is to give you an opportunity to really surface the difficult feelings that you've had that maybe are buried, that you may not even realize are there, and get a chance to work with them. So I'm going to just first talk about my own experience. And there wasn't any one situation that happened and then suddenly I found myself in this lost place. It was almost like a deterioration of inspiration, I would say, where I suddenly was wondering, am I connected? Like I was getting messages, but they were the same messages over and over and over again. And they were messages of let go, surrender, let go. And you know what? After a while, it really felt like, is this real? Like, is this even a real message? And in fact, it was. And I promise you, the surrender and the letting go does end eventually. But what these periods really are about is helping us separate ego attachment from the soul. And what I mean by that is what happened during the pandemic. And again, whether you had an extreme experience during isolation or not, was that our brains were thrown into a position where we are constantly wondering when the other shoe is going to drop. Now, you may not be experiencing that at a visceral level, but just by its nature, when suddenly something that seemed completely impossible to our brains happens, it then triggers the amygdala, right? The fear brain to be on watch for what else is going to go wrong, what else is going to happen that we did not think was possibly going to happen. And when that happens, the fear brain gets fired up. Well, so does the ego, right? The ego is really powered by our relationship to others. And so again, I've talked about this a lot here, but I'm just going to remind you, our amygdala, our fear brain is always looking to be accepted by the community, by the tribe, by your core group, because it equates that to safety, to literal life safety, right? And so it's constantly looking for how am I acceptable? And then the ego is looking for that ego satisfaction of acceptance, which is oftentimes things that are outside of ourselves, like money and career and our physical being, Um, Anything that you perceive a judgment by others and you believe has to be different in order to be accepted is an ego attachment. And so when you get sort of thrown out there in that metaphorical desert where you suddenly feel disconnected from anything that matters, the immediate place, well, at least that I turn to, is to be mad at God, to be mad at the divine. Like, why have you, why have you forsaken me? Right. But what's really happening is we're not getting the ego gratification of connection to essentially um, drive our ego to release its need for control. It's a way to not feed the ego what gives it comfort, what gives it satisfaction, because it's basically starved then. And as the ego is starved, then the soul can then be in charge, step up and be in charge. And you don't really see that result until you're on the other side of the desert. So, what do you do when you're in this metaphorical desert? What do you do when you're in that state of hopelessness, when you're in that state of confusion? And like I said, I was there. I mean, I was ready to pack it all up. I just wanted to really go away, just go far, far away. And I didn't even know why or what I thought was going to happen when I got far away. I just knew that nothing felt right and nothing felt real. I was questioning whether I was living up to what, my purpose was, why I'm here. And I've said it before and I still believe this, like our purpose is simply to be the light we are in the world, but I didn't even feel like I was a light. I felt like I was a big old shadow walking around. Um so what is it that you are meant to do when you're in this desert? Well, understand this, if the purpose is to release ego attachment and therefore strengthen spiritual connection, strengthen the soul's directive power over our life, meaning the decisions you're making are based on what the soul needs. Well, the first thing is, even though it may feel challenging, is turn towards spirit, turn towards the divine, turn towards your own soul, turn towards your spirit guides, and be doing things that will sustain you spiritually, which can be very hard to do if all of a sudden you feel lost, right? Because it almost feels like, well, screw you, divine, screw you, God, screw you, whoever, screw you, spirit guides. You're not helpful right now. I'm not going to invest any time in our communication. I was there as well. I still was communicating on a daily basis, but I was making it very clear I was not at all pleased with how things were going. And that's the thing, is keep connecting, communicate your displeasure, communicate your confusion, communicate your struggle. And by the way, one of the tools that I think is so helpful, especially helpful when you're in that period, when you have anxiety, when you're questioning, is oracle cards. If you're listening to this podcast, you won't see what I'm holding up, but this is my Space for Magic Oracle card deck, which you can get at pattylennon.com/cards. But when you're pulling oracle cards, there's a beautiful thing that happens, which is that it gives your eyes something to do, it gives your brain something to do, it gives your finger something to do. It starts to interact with the brain on a lot of levels, which then reduces the stress level your brain is experiencing, and then your brain's more likely to let in the kind of communication you're wanting. Oracle cards also give you very tangible direction, right? So I am right now holding up a card I pulled up randomly, and it's the Angels card. And This was so helpful to me while I was struggling, because even though I wrote the guidebook that comes with the oracle cards, I would go to the guidebook and be reading what I wrote, a year and a half, 2 years ago when I created this, and it would give me so much comfort. So in this case, like the angels card, and maybe this is a message for you. When you open up the guidebook, says the angels are singing your praises. They have been watching you from above and are truly amazed by how far you've come and all you've accomplished. They want you to know that they are close to you and are sending you many signs. Those signs are symbols of love and celebration. You may be seeing feathers, hearts, or even party decoration. These are all ways the angels let you know that although you don't always see how brave and strong you are, they do. Oh my goodness, I'm tearing up. They ask that you celebrate yourself the way they are celebrating you, because you're amazing. And over again, I would find with these cards that it would just remind me that even though I was struggling, and this is what I would tell you, and I am telling you right now, when you're struggling, your spirit team, your angels, your spirit guides, the divine, all see how brave you are. And sometimes being reminded of that bravery and that courage is what will sustain you, will get you to take a step forward. Because the thing is, you can't leave the desert, and that goes to number 2. You can't leave the desert without putting one foot in front of the other. And what that looks like is taking inspired action, no matter how small and often pointless it feels. And the reason it feels pointless is because in the grand scheme of how bad you feel, the inspired action doesn't really seem to be able to move the needle a lot on what is going on for you. But what you're experiencing when you're taking those inspired actions is acting in faith. By the very effort of taking a step forward, whatever it is, even though it doesn't seem to be able to carry you far enough to relieve your pain or your fear or your doubt or your struggle, you're then saying, I'm taking this step because I'm trusting you, divine, have me. I'm trusting that the inspiration behind this action is real. And just by that very act, you're strengthening your soul's power in your life, your soul's ability to move you forward. And I will tell you, if you're finding yourself in a desert, that something big is coming for you. Something really big and amazing and transformative is coming for you. And that is part of the reason why the desert has arrived, to strengthen your faith, to strengthen your courage, to strengthen you, so that as you move forward with this big transformative event that's coming, you then already have that soul strength, that soul courage to rely on. Which leads me to the third thing you need to do when you're in the desert, which is rest. And so that means you're only doing inspired action. You're not pushing. You're resting in every way, shape, or form, meaning if you need to take a day where you're just not thinking and you go wander in the woods, or you're watching Netflix, or whatever the thing is that feels like just taking the pressure off of you, do that, and do that often. Know that when you move through the desert, you're going to be moving slowly, right? Like if you were in a real desert, you wouldn't want to be racing, because you want to conserve your energy. And that's the same as in this desert. The thing is, while you're there, the desert, not the dessert, because the dessert would be a good thing, right? The desert feels really unfair. It feels really unfair. And towards the end of my time in that period, instead of getting closer to the divine, I felt like I was getting farther apart. I have like rock solid faith. It has been tested in lots of different ways. So it wasn't that my faith that the divine existed, or my faith that there was a plan here, it changed. What was causing such a gap for me was between me and the divine, me and my spirit guides, was the feeling that all of us collectively had far overestimated my ability to navigate the life journey I was in. And there were a few things that happened in my personal life that felt like they just kept putting more and more pressure on me. More and more fear was being generated in me. But looking back now, I can see that was happening so I could let go of it all. So I could see it for the illusion it was. So the pressure got so big that I had no choice but to surrender it, right? I had no choice but to surrender. The thing though is you don't have to get to that point. You could start surrendering right now. And so when you think about it, if you knew that everything you were worried about was going to work out for your highest good and the highest good of all, what would change for you? What would shift? It's really hard to do it when you're in that lost place, but I promise you it does work. It really does work. Now, I wrestled and challenged and fought it and pushed back. So I don't particularly hold myself up as an example of someone who did this flawlessly from the moment I knew I was in that desert. In fact, most of the time that I was in that desert, I wondered if I just wasn't enough. Was I not doing enough? Was I not being courageous enough? Was there something they were telling me, they being my spirit guides and my angels, was there something they were guiding me to do, but I was missing it, right? All of these fear thoughts, all these doubt thoughts, those all come from the ego. Eventually, when the ego is not fed, when success is not seen, what happens is the ego gives up. And that's when you exit the desert. That's when things start to brighten up. That's when things start to get easy. Now, there is one last thing that I think is important, and this was not something I personally struggled with, but it's knowing how you and your unique light in the world works. Meaning understanding what your soul's power is, how you anchor the light here on the planet, it really does make a difference. Because when you know that, then even in your darkest moments, you can search for ways where you have still shown up that way. And that alone can be a guiding light for you. I'll be talking more about that in coming episodes. But one of the things I've done since this podcast has been on, I guess, rerun is what we'll call it, is we have crafted a new quiz. And this quiz will show you what your soul's secret power is. So if you go to pattylennon.com/quiz, you will be able to take that quiz. When you get to the end of it, you will find out what your soul's secret power is. And from there, you will get an affirmation that helps you power that up. You will also get a list of podcasts that we think will be particularly supportive of you. You will get my personal recommendations on actions you can take right now to relieve some of the stress that comes with trying to be different than the way you were built. And that's what a lot of this is. Our ego keeps trying to pull us towards this external version of who we are supposed to be, right? Based on approval. And our soul is trying to take us on our highest life path. That's the battle that's happening in the desert. And the soul is always going to win. I promise you, the soul is always going to win. But if you understand your personal magic, if you understand your soul's power, it is a lot easier. So go to pattylennon.com/quiz. You can take that quiz. It's very easy and it's a fun quiz. I mean, do we need one more tedious thing to do? We absolutely do not. And as we created this quiz, it was funny because I would look at the questions, and if the question felt even like an ounce of not funness, I was like, it needs to go. It needs to go. So it's only, I think we have it down to 10 questions or 9 questions. And it takes only a couple of minutes and you'll get your results and you'll have fun in the process. So be sure to check that out. And hey, I would like to know what's up for you. Can you send me an email, patty@pattylennon.com? Tell me you listened to this episode. Tell me what you got from it or what you still need to get from it. Tell me what's alive for you. What are you struggling with? What are you succeeding at? What do you want to hear more about? I'm so excited to talk to you each week from this platform now. And again, a reminder, one of my favorite tools all the time, actually, all the time. But especially when you're in that lost period, are oracle cards. So the Space for Magic Oracle card deck you can get at pattylennon.com/cards. If you're watching this podcast, I will tell you the card that just pulled up when I pulled the deck out again to show it is the right card, WRITE. And I'm going to end with reading you what the right card says based on the guidebook that comes with the Oracle card deck, which you will get when you order your deck. The page is calling you. Sit down and write. The words that sit inside you are meant to be released. Just because you have put pen to paper does not mean you need to share what you have written with anyone else. When the time to share has come, you will know it. For now, just write. If you have been wondering if you are meant to create a book right now, then this card is the answer to what you've been looking for. Right. And I think on a really basic level, it's just write down what you're feeling, get it out of you so that you can at least have somewhere where it's out of your head, where it's out of your mind, and give you some clear space to think. As you navigate this time, please let me know if there's something I can do to support you. And hey, if you are like nailing life right now, you're like, Patty, what is this desert you speak of? I'm a rock star. My life is on fire and I am having a ball. Tell me that. I want to hear what you're doing. I want to get underneath the hood of what you've been doing to raise your vibration because we can all benefit. All right, everyone, have a beautiful week. Mwah, mwah, mwah. I'm so happy to be back here with you.